We're back. It's warm in here and we're tired. So bear with us as we go through Propositions 18 and 19. So Proposition 18 basically says that 17-year-olds can vote if they are going to turn 18 and are eligible to vote by the time the next election comes around. And I think that includes like primary elections, whatever the next election is, they would be allowed to register to vote at the age of 17. So if you vote yes on this, you say yes, let the 17-year-olds vote if they're going to reach that eligibility by their 18th birthday. If you say no, you say no, things remain as they are currently, which is you have to wait until you are actually 18 in order to register to vote and participate in the next election. So my thoughts are kind of similar to what they were with Proposition 17, which is kind of, what's the harm? I don't know. I don't really see huge problems with this one or major ramifications. The only thing I can think of is that, you know, the next step will be, okay, well, what about 16-year-olds? Then they can vote. I mean, you know, you go like kind of a weird domino effect and then we have like kindergartners voting. I don't think that's going to happen. So that's like the worst case scenario I could think of. But there was one argument that I read against it, and it was 17-year-olds' brains aren't developed yet and they don't have any world experience. Well, 18-year-olds' brains aren't developed yet either, and they don't have a lot of world experience. And if we're saying that the 17-year-old will be 18 by the time the election comes around, I don't know. I didn't see that as a very strong argument. The positive, or the argument for that I saw, was it could help bring more people, more kids get them more involved in politics and get them more sort of integrated into grown-up society. Then an argument against that was, oh, but they could be influenced by their teachers and the grown-ups around them. But so could 18-year-olds. So could I. So again, I didn't really see any compelling argument really for or against, which kind of has me leaning towards yes, as a sort of why not? So Dave, do you know why not?
Well, let me start by saying, you mentioned Prop 17. I think in the time since we recorded the last one, I've come over to 17 saying yes. I think the positives would probably outweigh the negatives, or the potential positives at least. I don't see the downside as much. This one, though, is one of the biggest wastes of a ballot spot I've ever seen in my life. It's like, okay, there's not a huge reason to vote no, but there's like no good reason to vote yes. Like, why is this even on here? Why are you wasting my time reading this? It's like, yeah, you can make that argument for 17-year-olds, but like Sam already said, at what age can you stop making that argument, right? 16, 15, 14? And it's like, are those age groups voting like some tragedy that will destroy our democracy? No, not necessarily, but I think we all agree that there is some brain formation that's happening. And if your argument, like Sam, is, well, 18-year-olds' brains aren't fully developed either, so what's the harm? Like, if we're already admitting that 18-year-olds aren't fully there and we're letting them vote, and I'm not arguing that we shouldn't let them vote, like voter suppression or anything, but if you already know they're not, why are we lowering the bar? Not to mention, why are we doing it in the most Byzantine and convoluted way ever? It's like, yeah, you can vote when you're 17, but only if there's a special election that year, and only if you would turn 18 before this specific election later. It's like, there's all this talk about voter fraud and fear about that, and I'm not here to fearmonger, but if you want to help voter fraud, you start writing weird, bizarre laws like this, where it's like, yeah, you can vote at this age, but only if Jupiter happens to be lined up with Saturn on the day of your birth and the lines of birth. It's that
is the actual bill.
Yeah, it's just, it's dumb. It feels a little bit like this was pushed into place by like the current sitting like state senate and governor, and it feels a little bit like they know the Democrats have the youth vote, right? So it's like, well, why don't we just push a little more? And it's like, it'll help increase like youth what's the word I'm looking for? Youth participation in the vote. It's like, well, yeah, if you let more people do it, of course it will increase participation. That's like the definition. But it's like, I can't imagine that the number of people this is going to help are going to be like, wow, I sure would register to vote if only I could vote for this special election earlier in the year. And now that I have to wait till I'm 18, I'm not going to vote. Or I'm not going to register, because it's nobody. That's like 0 people that will be. If you're so interested in it that you want to vote at 17, I can't imagine, like 17 and a half or whatever age group this really is targeting, I can't imagine what the circumstances that would cause you to not want to do that when you hit 18. I think it's really dumb, and I say no. So.
Okay. Yeah.
And again, it's not like a huge deal if it passes. I'm not gonna old man yells at cloud if it like passes. It's just gonna be like, all right, whatever. This was so unnecessary. It never needed to happen. I guess unlike Sam, if I'm like, I don't really know, I don't see a reason not to, or 2, I generally go with no, because I assume somebody's trying to pull a fast one.
That, honestly, that was another thought I had. It's kind of like, why are we trying to push for this group in particular? So I could be swayed to the other side of that.
Yeah. And we'll actually talk about that a little more in the next one, I think.
Yeah, we will.
So it's definitely interesting.
All right, well, on that note,
good?
So yeah, we might be canceling each other out, or I might go with the no on this one. It's not breaking any huge issues for me, so.
Yeah. Okay, so Prop 19 is very interesting. I've definitely had more conversations on this one than anything else. I said, 15 was the one I've seen most talk about, but I've already had, like, a pretty interesting conversation with members of my family who reached out to me and were like, don't vote yes on this. And another person's like, should I vote on this? And they're like, yeah, Dad's voting yes on this. And it's just like, it was very, well, whatever. Johnny could sway him by the time this happens. I don't know. So, but I mean, shout outs to my brother who actually like reached out and wanted to talk about this, and we had a really good talk, even though we're both on opposite sides of it still. My sister who texted me was like, Johnny's telling me not to vote on this or vote no on this. What do you think? And it was good. Anyway, so this does several things, all of which has to do with the property tax in California, which we already talked about a little bit on 15. Where property tax is more based on what the sale price of the home was rather than its value in the current market. So that helps keep the property tax down in most circumstances. So what this does is it allows homeowners who are elderly, defined as over 55, severely disabled, or whose homes were destroyed by wildfire disaster, when they buy a new home to replace their current home, whether it was destroyed or if they're elderly, it doesn't matter. Basically, the property tax on the new place stays down. It doesn't make it as punishing for them to move or buy new houses, basically. So if your grandma wants to downsize because their house is massive and they just can't deal with that anymore, they don't have to worry about, I can't do that because I'm going to be paying higher property taxes on the smaller house because of how the law works. So it fixes that. It also limits tax benefits for certain transfers of real property between family members. Basically, what this means is that if your parents die and they pass on a home to you, if you're not living in that home within 1 year, the property tax jumps up as if it had been. It goes up to what its current value is rather than the value it was sold at. This is being pitched as... Basically, it's being pitched as closing a lot of loopholes that people are using, like specifically like people who are in the renter business to just inherit these homes, and when they have them, they just pass them down to their kids or who knows. This doesn't address it in here, but I'm assuming they could probably pass it on to like shell corporations or who knows what the heck it is, and just like keep the property tax down and keep renting it out. And this is sort of being pitched as sort of contributing to the housing crisis in California, where it's very hard to specifically buy a home in California because it's very profitable to rent in California, especially if you're getting these tax breaks where you're basically getting it for what it was purchased in the 90s or whatever. Like, that's insane value. There are a few other things in here regarding farms, and in terms of basically, even though this gives breaks to some people, they've done the math and it's going to result in a net increase in the revenue for the state. Most of that is going to go to firefighters and other fire prevention stuff, but some of it will go to local government and also to schools in a smaller amount. I went back and forth on this one for a bit. Let me tell you the things I'm not crazy about. The stuff about the elderly, or even the wildfire victims, which for those of you who don't know, I work in fire law, so I work with people who lose their homes in fires. It's kind of a big business in California now, unfortunately, with so many of these being caused by power companies and stuff. And we all know that fires have been going around right now, so it definitely feels a little topical in terms of them putting that in here. That's not primarily why, that's not something I'm crazy about. It's nice, I guess. I certainly don't mind it being in there. I don't have any issues. I think it's a good thing, but it's kind of small. I'm also not crazy about most of this money going to firefighters. Probably the biggest reason my brother is voting no on this is he does accounting for the city of San Diego, and so he sees how much firefighters make. They make a lot, and they don't do a lot of work. They are ready to do very dangerous work at any given time, but they're not actually doing that work most of the time. Sorry, I'm gonna get people mad at me just for saying that, but that's just how it is. Yeah, they're not paid because they're doing lots of work. They're paid because they have to be ready to do very dangerous work, potentially for long periods of time at any given moment. That's how it is. And so he does not like that. And so the fact that this is going to firefighters isn't huge for him. I kind of agree. I'm not huge about where this money is being allocated to. But I'm also not crazy about how this got put on here. It was very heavily lobbied by the realtor associations because they want to be able to sell more homes. Primarily if elderly people. There was a very similar bill on the ballots 2 years ago, which was basically just the elderly portion of this, where the elderly could switch homes without getting that tax hit. And it was voted down, primarily, I don't want to say primarily, but partially because it was a net loss in revenue for the state and people weren't crazy about that. Basically just money for schools or whatever was just going away so seniors could move homes. And people were like, So they're doing this because this would cause more homes to sell, right? The elderly would be moving homes more often, presumably, because they do tend to downsize. It would also encourage fire victims to buy rather than rent necessarily. And it would also force inherited homes to be sold a lot more. My brother was saying another one of the reasons he doesn't like this is if our parents pass, my brother, my sister, and I are all living in different homes and we inherit this, we're not really, it's going to make it very difficult for us to hold on to the home and use it as a source of secondary income if we want to rent it out, because the tax jump is going to be so high. All that said, I think I'm still voting yes on this. And I don't really care about like the realtor interest. Like it makes my stomach turn a little bit to know like that's how bills get on here. And this isn't the only one like this. But I think that being able to sort of close that loophole and make housing more available on the market is a good thing. I've sort of been doing a little bit of research into, I don't want to say research, I've been watching a very interesting game that I just learned called Democracy, and it talks a lot, basically you get to like run a country and pass taxes and stuff, and it talks a bit about like regressive taxes versus progressive taxes. This would probably be considered a progressive tax because it's essentially a tax on the wealthy, right? If you're inheriting a home and you're not living in it, that automatically implies you have two homes, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're going to keep that, you're going to be taxed more as the wealthy. I tend to like those a little bit more than regressive taxes, which are things like sales tax, which affect everybody, but sort of affect the poor more because they have to buy things, and like it affects more of their total income because they have less, which is sort of liberal of me. But it's just like sort of where I am, like seeing how like the wealthy do things in this country. And when you think about, I just think it would be a good thing to open up that housing market more. I don't want an inheritance tax where you inherit the thing and you have to pay taxes on it. The fact that if my parents pass away and my sister's like, yeah, I want to stay in this house, nothing changes for her, right? She inherited the house, there's no additional tax, like this doesn't affect her at all. But, you know, if we wanted to hold on to it, and some of this is kind of a personal thing, if we wanted to hold on to it and rent it out, just like, you know, I'd rather just sell it. I think this sounds like a pain. It just sounds like a drag, and it's just, yeah. I do understand the perspective of wanting to have wealth that you can pass on to your kids and sort of that alternate income. I mean, they're getting a house. If they sell it, they're going to make a boatload in California. You know, they could move to Texas and live the rest of their lives. So, you know what I mean? So I like having more housing available for people to purchase. I like closing sort of those renter loopholes. And I do like the fact that the elderly and the fire victims do get this benefit. I think that's a nice sort of side thing. But I think that, I think it's more important to sort of make housing more available for purchase. There is also an argument that this could reduce the amount of rental properties that could be available because you're sort of closing those type of people out of renting out their home, which you could argue make housing less affordable for renters, which is another thing that's going to come up later. But I think making ownership more available to people is more important. And if the realtors happen to benefit from that, fine. Like, I don't know. Sorry, that was a lot on that one.
No, I'm really glad that you kind of took the lead on that one, because I have been trying to understand this one, and I can't. Like, I've been trying to make a decision on this one and research it, and I don't know, some taxes just don't compute. Numbers in general don't
money
really
for
compute.
schools, Sam.
And then there was that. I was like, oh shoot, red flag. I don't know. But like the main thing that stuck out to me as I was reading it was like the Realtors Association was really pushing hard for this, and that automatically made me kind of like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But I think you laid it out really well. I think you looked at both sides, and that was helpful for me. So I think I will be voting yes along with you.
Okay.
Be united, yes.
Yeah.
So there are going to be some propositions that even though I spend a good amount of time trying to wrap my brain around them, I won't be there. And so I really rely on people like Dave, who I trust, to be able to explain, kind of work through that with me. So thank you for that. But if anyone else has any commentary or questions or other perspectives, we would be happy to hear them. Put them in the comments, text us, call us. We would love to talk about this more. Our perspectives are limited, obviously. So if you have anything else to say about any of the propositions we've talked about so far, or the ones that we're going to address later, we'd love to talk about them and hear about it.
I'd be especially curious. I know at least one person who owns a condo in addition to their primary home, so I'd be very curious to hear if this would affect like how property taxes work for condos specifically. Like if that's covered by the condo like association, or if you're paying it individually for your little room. Yeah, I'd be curious about that too, if anybody knows.
Hearing personal stories or how things are going to affect people that we know personally is very helpful too. Because, even though I'm trying to avoid getting too caught up by the, like, emotional appeals of ads and things, when I know you, when you know the person in front of you, that helps. Because then you can see, okay, this is a direct impact or even an indirect impact on someone that I know and care about. So, all right, cool. Well, we'll be back with more propositions later. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.